Warning. This video will be going in depth about the game Mad Father. Beware that, not only is this a horror game, it is also one that deals with very heavy and uncomfortable topics. Topics which include human experimentation, incest, pedophilia, necrophilia, sexual abuse, trauma, and CPTSD. This game's imagery can also be gory and bloody at times. If you are underage, please do not watch this video. If you are easily disturbed by these topics, please do not watch this video. Please, stay safe. Mad Father is a game that came out in 2012 during the classic RPG Maker horror era. It was made by Sin, who previously made the game Misao, using the Wolf RPG editor engine. It was free to play, featured no direct combat system, and was a wide success, garnering the attention of Let's Players and horror enjoyers alike. Recently, it got a re-release on Steam and Switch, costing real actual money, but being worth every cent of it in my opinion. On its surface, it seems cliché, maybe even formulaic. The zombified remains of test subjects come back from the dead to haunt the mad doctor who experimented on them, and the innocent young girl protagonist bears witness to the horrors all while fighting for her life. But on closer look, we find a much deeper story, a much darker struggle. If you haven't played the game or its re-release, or it's just been a while and you need a refresher, here's as short of a recap as I can manage. The game takes place in northern Germany, and our protagonist, Aya Drevis, is the daughter of a mad doctor. She lives in a giant mansion which belonged to her mother, and in the basement and catacombs of the mansion, her father and his assistant and secret lover Maria perform inhuman experiments. Aya, as our protagonist, ventures into the depths to save her father from the clutches of her mother's ghost who has come back to curse the mansion, and in doing so brought back all of the doctor's experiments to haunt him. The game's core gameplay loop is focused on the puzzles needed to be solved in order to progress through the mansion as well as get collectible gems, more on those later, and eventually reach the portal through which Aya seemingly enters hell. There, she confronts her mother and can make the choice between two endings. In the first ending, she lets her mother and father go, fulfilling her mother's wishes and betraying her father. Once she's back in the mansion, Maria backstabs her and continues the doctor's legacy. In the second, Aya banishes her mother, saving her father, who then reveals to Aya that his life's work is turning people into dolls. Terrified, Aya runs away, but fails to escape her father, becoming yet another doll. In the third and true ending, unlocked by finding and reading Maria's diary, Aya saves her father, but with the help of Maria escapes his clutches. They burn the building and everything inside and escape during the night. Aya finds one of her father's books, and the scene fades. We get two additional scenes showing us the aftermath of the event. On the one hand, we have Aya, now an adult, running a clinic that treats patients for free. We're introduced to Jean, a rather feeble woman, and one of Aya's patients. On the other hand, we get a scene of Aya's father, not dead and instead under the watch and care of the salesman we saw helping Aya throughout the game. Aya's father is still obsessed with her visage, recreating her and planning something with this mature Aya. We will discuss this horrid scene in depth later. Gathering all of the collectible gems throughout the game earns the player another bonus scene of Aya lovingly holding an actual inanimate doll, not made of humans, and reiterating that she promised never to forget the people who died by her father's hand. The game has two bonus modes, If and Blood mode. If is a short look at the mansion right before it's burned through the eyes of Robin, a secondary character, who the fandom used to call Dio, revealing both the true nature of the salesman as well as posing the question of what Aya will become. A doll taunts Robin, saying the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and Robin in turn promises that if Aya follows in her father's footsteps, he will stop her. Blood mode is nearly identical to the normal mode, except Aya is an adult, reliving the night she lost her home. The puzzles are the same, but we get extra insight into how Aya, now with a more mature perspective, interacts with all the things that scarred her as a child, including her forgiving her father and expressing that she misses him. What saves her from this dangerous dream is, again, Maria, who wakes Aya up and makes sure she's alright. I adore how you can tell Maria is older too only by the little bags under her eyes, and nothing else. Anime styles can be so dumb. Aya asks if Maria really wants to stay by Aya, and Maria enthusiastically says yes. Aya smiles, and we're shown the text, "May you be smiled upon," reminding us of the good luck blessing Aya received both by her mother and by her basically adopted brother Robin. Not so bad, right? Again, on the surface, this game doesn't seem to say much of anything about the horrific topics it grapples with, seemingly dismissing its own protagonist's developed characteristics for the sake of the evil lives on storyline. Or at least, that's what people want to think. The actual game leaves everything open-ended, with no direct explanation of whether Aya carried on her father's work or not. Some would say it's obvious she did, but I have to argue to the contrary. And to do that, I need to take you deep, deep down the rabbit hole of Mad Father's dual narrative. From the intro cutscene alone, we see that Aya is both aware of her father's immoral experiments on humans, but also forgiving and trusting of him enough to simply turn a blind eye. Aya's mother died from a cold, as we're told, and now Aya feels much more alone than ever, as it seems her mother took the role of primary caretaker. Not just that, but Aya seems bothered and angered by her father having a relationship with the housemaid, Maria, who is called a freeloader in the extras menu? Ouch. Again, from the introductory monologue, we can tell that the doctor, Alfred, has been pursuing a relationship with Maria even while his wife and Aya's mother, Monica, was still alive. This sets up a key conflict with the main four characters. Aya wants her father to stay by her side and be an attentive parent, while he's too preoccupied with his research to do that. Monica wants him to be faithful, and Maria... well, it's not directly clear what Maria wants from Alfred, as it almost seems she idolizes him, but I'll explain her wants in a bit. The conflict essentially seems to be two women and a little girl fighting for the love and attention of an objectively horrible man. How progressive, right? Well, it kind of is, because the story dissects this sort of trope by adding a twist on it by the end. Again, I'll get to it. You know what? Put a pin in that note. It'll stay there until I address it. Maria is worried about Aya's opinion of her, put a pin in that as well, and Alfred simply tells Maria to care for Aya, sort of brushing off the issue. He says that Aya will be 11 soon, and that it's a troublesome age, put a pin in that too, before the chiming of the clock cuts off the rest of their dialogue. No, you don't need to put a pin in that. The game takes basically its whole runtime to show us the second half of that cutscene. Alfred calls Aya his most precious doll, and Monica, having overheard this conversation, storms in and demands an explanation. Alfred seems inconvenienced at best. He doesn't value his wife's opinion in the slightest until she threatens to take Aya away, at which point he kills her. How classy. Here we see what Maria actually wants. She's petrified that the doctor killed Monica, and when she's asked to lie to Aya about how her mother died, she's equally as horrified. In the end, she obeys her orders, but not happily. She's doing this for Alfred, not because she wants to, but because she almost feels she belongs to him. She sees this as her home, her only safety, and she's not willing to lose that over someone's death, even if it means hurting someone. Gameplay begins when the clock strikes midnight and the date officially becomes the anniversary of Monica's death. Aya feels the room go cold, tries to sleep, hears a scream, tries to leave, gets attacked, flees back to her room, and there's a stranger there. He introduces himself as Ogre, a salesman, reading one of the books on Aya's shelf. It's important to note that all of the books we're told Aya likes or has read aren't exactly child appropriate. We even see in a flashback her mother reading her one such story, before telling Aya she should support her father no matter what. Put a pin in that one too. A common complaint people have about the first half of the game is that it has too many flashbacks. It's too distracting and keeps cutting up the gameplay, they say. Personally, I don't agree, because when the actual tense parts of the game happen, the flashbacks are gone. The first part, which I dubbed the shallow waters of the house itself, are supposed to make you, the player, understand Aya's motivations for wanting to save her mad father.
Roll credits.
You see that, despite it all, they were a happy family, and he was a caring father to Aya. Even when she does things like play with a chainsaw that she couldn't reach and was given to her by her mother, may I add, he scolds her but doesn't use any harsh punishments or display any abusive behavior. This makes Aya assume he has the best intentions, if only for her alone. Another pin for the pile. Young Aya explores the mansion in a desperate bid to save her father because of this. The zombies from previous installments are replaced by dolls, probably because of censorship reasons, but also setting up the theme of this being Aya's horrible childhood manifesting in order to stop her. Throughout her journey, Aya encounters many of her father's test subjects, all of whom are either mutilated or petrified or hungry or trapped. These people need help, and Aya does it out of the goodness of her heart, while the player does it for the collectible gems, which are used to unlock that bonus cutscene after the true ending. The last but not least pin on our screens. Before diving into all the test subjects, let's take a moment to see the character of the only spared patient, Maria. She's a deeply caring woman, one who was abandoned and left behind, and therefore never wants the same fate to befall another. Alfred offers her food and shelter as a guise to use her as a test subject, but after he sees her prowess with medicine, decides he's better off having her as an assistant. Maria, then younger and much more impressionable, as well as trusting of this kind man she didn't know the intentions of, agrees without a second thought, pledging her allegiance to the doctor from that day on. This is an important character beat, not just for Maria, but also for Aya, who, after having found this out, starts to empathize with Maria, something she didn't do before. I had previously viewed Maria as a rival of sorts, someone who was taking her father away from her, as well as the family unit she was so attached to. She didn't want Maria as a mother figure because, in her own words, there is only one mom for me. Once she starts to see Maria as a person and not a rival, she gains the ability to help her even when her own life is at risk, just like what Maria did for others. And really, Aya helps just about anyone and anything she can. Even when she's scared of the monsters in her home, she still finds it in her heart to show them kindness and give them closure. In response, or maybe as the inciting incident, some of these people show Aya how they died, how her father killed them. In particularly tragic cases, we're shown a story like Ines's, who was taken in as an adopted daughter, even to the point she was told she will be Aya's older sister, only for her to be killed like all the other test subjects. It's deeply cruel, and Ines's resentment is wholly justified, especially when we note that she is one of the very few people who consistently help Aya instead of trying to hurt her or kill her in retribution. Ines sees Aya as a little sister still, and so does Robin. These people, deeply hurt and betrayed by Aya's father, can still see the good in Aya and decide she shouldn't need to pay for the sins of her father. Almost all of the gem collecting in this game is done directly by helping these test subjects, with one exception: the screaming plant that ate the gem has to be killed for it, but like, it's a plant. One of those plants caused the death of a doggy. Come on, we can let this one slide. Other than the mandrake, Aya seems to be kind and non-violent to all the residents of the mansion. In a previous version of the game, when a severed head is blocking her way, Aya walks across it, but in a new version she hops over it. This deliberate change shows that Aya means no harm to these things stalking the halls of her home, but even in spite of all that, she ends up having to draw her weapon on another. One of the walking corpses wants to be killed, like really wants to die. She screams at Aya to kill her, scaring her and causing her to draw her weapon. Aya is disturbed by this, collapsing from exhaustion shortly after it happens. She didn't want to kill, but she had to. It's tragic to see a child be put through this, but it's all a piece of a larger puzzle. In Blood Mode, where Aya is shown to be not as squeamish around corpses, this woman is replaced by Jean. This scene is unspeakably important to Aya's larger character that I can't even begin to get into it here. Point being, through Aya helping the test subjects, her father's abuse victims, she gains gems. They're just simple collectibles, right? Well, yes, but also no. Narratively, these things seem to be representative of Aya as a character, each piece showing the larger whole that is Aya, as collecting them all unlocks the scene of Aya lovingly holding a doll, a part of her you wouldn't have seen otherwise. It shows the culmination of Aya helping everyone she can, because she feels a deep connection to the victims of her father's work. I'd argue part of the reason why Aya feels so attached to these test subjects is not only because she's a shut-in who doesn't see many people at all, as stated in her character bio, but also because these people are a lot more like her than maybe she's willing to admit. Maybe on a subconscious level, she knows she was always at risk of being one of her father's victims too, but that's more speculation than anything else. She seems to know she's not above these people, even if she was taught to turn a blind eye to their suffering while living in a rich family. Aya is as empathetic as a character gets, a trait she seems to have inherited from her mother, at least in some regard, as her mother was the deeply empathetic kind of person who is also able to empathize with even serial killers and like. On the other hand, Aya is also curious. The gems aren't always easy to find and require the player to go out of their way to solve extra puzzles. This shows the second important half of Aya's character, her curiosity, something she seems to have inherited from her father wholesale. Aya isn't purely emotional. She's a critical thinker who ruminates on the things she knows and draws conclusions based on what's presented. This is nothing earth-shattering, but it's important to note because it adds on to why medicine was something Aya would choose to pursue later in life. Aya, trying to catch up to her father, enters the deepest chambers of the house and finds none other than her mother, taking her father deeper into the mansion still, literally chasing her parents, metaphorically trying to follow in their footsteps. Confused, Aya wonders if her mother has come back like all the other corpses, but Ogre tells her that the curse upon the house was made by Monica. Aya refuses to believe him at first, possibly because what Ogre is saying has much more sinister implications. The test subjects may have been killed by Alfred, but the mansion is cursed because of Monica. As it's revealed in Blood Mode, the mansion belonged to Monica's family, and she showed the depths of the house, read her family's history, to Alfred so he could kill people with a purpose. In a metaphorical sense, the curse upon the mansion is less about Monica's sorrow and more about her family's cult history of experimenting on humans for the purpose of eternal life, a fascination Alfred seems to share. Emphasis on seems. Though Alfred is a killer, he doesn't seem to get anything out of it. He doesn't feel joy, he doesn't feel pain, he kills for the sake of killing. This lines up with the psychology of real-world psychopathic murderers, though the stereotype is that they derive some sort of pleasure from the act. In the story of Alfred's childhood, Alfred seems to be driven by mostly curiosity, but once he's inconvenienced, he uses what he has learned to kill his mother too. This is where his true fascination begins: beauty. See, Alfred is the special kind of insane, where he finds the aesthetic of unmoving, lifeless corpses to be the most beautiful thing there is. His research focuses on turning people into dolls, preserving their beauty in death and making them wonderful accessories for your home, seemingly going against the Drevis family's original experiments which aimed to create everlasting life. This delves into a deeper pathology of Alfred's, his want for people to be obedient and never step out of line. We saw what he did to Maria and Monica when they got in his way, but what about Aya? He never seemed to force her into any corners, but he does. All the kindnesses he's shown Aya was for the express purpose of keeping her untainted, making her into the most idyllic little girl he can, to the point where the idea of her growing up and being a normal person is deeply disgusting to him, wanting to turn her into a doll so her innocence can be saved forever. This is in direct opposition to what Monica wants. As part of the Drevis cult and a fan of serial criminals of all kinds, she seems to be conditioning Aya to be just like them. Alfred writes about Aya playing with dead animals, and these memories haunt Aya. Through Monica's notes, we see how she's the one who gave Aya dead animals to play with, remarking on how excited Aya seems to be at them. Aya, though, at such a young age, has no idea what death even is, really, and can't comprehend why what her mother or father are doing is wrong. Her father teaches her to apologize to the animals she hurt, hoping to keep her an innocent little girl, but the dead animals never really stop haunting Aya from then on. Even encountering one of them in her dresser, when it wasn't there previously, seems to garner a scared reaction by Aya, judging by the sound cue that plays. Aya feels judged and watched by these poor animals, guilty that she hurt them, even when indirectly, and without knowing how to make it better, that guilt persists. This is, in essence, why Aya becomes a doctor. We see her say that she wants to make sure Jean never feels pain again, and many people assume this means Aya euthanizes her patients near universally. However, there really is nothing in the game to support this. I misspelled euthanizes, hold on. Euthanizes. Aya is caught in the crossfire of the bad parenting of both her mother and her father. On the one side, her father wants her to be a perfect and pure little girl, obedient at the expense of her own personhood. On the other, her mother wants her to be an adult and a killer, like what her family legacy would entail her daughter to be. Aya is dealing with a lot of deep family trauma that's been dumped on her when she's only 10, to the point it's not hard to assume she would turn out to be sick in the head too. This, my friends, is where Maria comes in. When Aya saves her father from her mother, Monica isn't content to let Aya have the happy life with her father she desired. For one, because she knows it couldn't exist, but also because Aya was deeply in danger any moment she was near her father. Despite everything Monica did to make Aya a killer, she is still the one that wanted Aya to keep living, and this cannot be sidelined. Monica cared about Aya as a person in a way that Alfred never did. Even with that, though, Monica admits she still loves Alfred. For what reason? I have no fucking clue. Having seen the truth of her mother's demise, Aya is now scared of her father, rightfully so. Alfred, seeing this, directly explains to Aya what it is he finds so fascinating about the dead. Aya is horrified that this is the fate that awaits her if she stays by her father, and runs away, screaming, "I don't want to be a doll." This is where Alfred's worries about Aya's troublesome behavior evolve further. Now, not only does he think she is like him, killing out of curiosity and therefore impure, she's also disobedient, not listening to him and getting in the way of his plans. He does not see her as a person, he sees her as an object, one he worked so very hard to mold into the perfect idea of innocence and beauty. As Aya runs away from her father, she also must hide, and at one point, Maria seems to know exactly where Aya is hiding. She doesn't tell Alfred though. One could say I'm reading too much into this one beat too long of her looking over at Aya's hiding place in an otherwise fast-paced sequence, but I think it adds up to what we know about Maria's character. She's caring nearly to a fault, putting other people's safety before her own needs. In this case, she needs the approval of the doctor, but Aya's safety comes first to her. She's worried about what Aya thought of her, not because she has some kind of disdain for Aya, but because she wants her acceptance. Once Maria is wounded badly by Alfred in rage, a core shift happens, both for Maria and for Aya, if Aya began to empathize with Maria in the first place, that is. The true ending is only unlocked with Maria's key, showing that without her, Aya's story has only tragic ends. Aya can choose to help Maria, and specifically not helping her when Aya understands Maria is shown to be something Aya doesn't want. Maria is genuinely surprised at Aya helping her like this, specifically saying she should be most loathsome to Aya. Maria seems to think genuinely low of herself, judging by not just this, but also by the way she speaks in her diary. Aya is the one who challenges Maria's view of herself, and challenges what her father wants them both to be. This is the most important scene in the game, in my opinion, because it perfectly encapsulates what the theme of this game actually is, even if it's phrased in a very childish way because Aya is still, 10. I'll show it here, word for the sake of driving the point home.
I'm the same as you, Maria. I thought I couldn't live without Father, but the way Father thinks of us, I don't want to be a doll, so I can't be with him anymore. But you and I, we both can't live alone, so let's go together. Even if Father's gone, I know the two of us can make it.
Aya explicitly states that the way her father thinks of other people is dehumanizing, and that she doesn't want to put up with it anymore. She also says neither of them can live alone, but they can make it together, and I couldn't have said it better myself. As abuse survivors, having each other's support, both in and outside of immediate danger, is extremely important. This is what I mean when I say this game is a lot deeper than one might assume at a first glance because of the way the central conflict is set up. Aya and Maria are no longer fighting for the attention of an abuser like he'd want them to. They're actively getting out of an extremely abusive household together. Even when it seems like Aya might have to leave Maria behind, her kindness towards her doesn't end fruitless. Maria saves Aya, incapacitating Alfred and allowing Aya a moment to breathe. This is where Aya really embraces Maria, not even explicitly as a mother figure, but as someone who wants the best for her and is able to help her when need be. Even as Alfred does one last jump scare, Robin comes in to help, solidifying that all of Alfred's previous victims now stand in solidarity with Aya. At least that's the way it appears, but we can't know for sure as they're not present after the curse has begun to lift. With a final goodbye and good luck charm, Aya leaves both the mansion and her old life behind with what little family she has left, Maria and her pet bunny, Snowball. However, that's not really where this ends. Snowball points Aya to a book from the mansion that survived the fire, and Aya readily takes it. Previously, she had described the book as having gross pictures and not liking looking at it, but now she appears interested in its contents. This is usually the scene people point to for evidence that Aya has become a monster too, coupled with Maria having some sort of bad feeling that she ascribes to the doctor. Maria's worry is justified though, as Alfred is still alive, and Aya, as previously described, is curious. Curious enough to take a book she thought unbearable before because she's more desensitized to the subject matter. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and Aya isn't falling far from the tree at all. She is pursuing medicine like her father did and is keeping her promises like her mother did. Her promise being to never let the tragedy of the Drevis Manor happen again, and to never forget its victims. This is, in my opinion, substantial proof that Aya does not do as her father did, nor as her mother's family did. Aya carves her own path, one of sorrow and loss, but of new beginnings as well, never forgetting the tragedy that brought her a better life. The game's ending being both open-ended and vaguely sinister serves the theme of its dual narrative: innocence and horror, family and haunting, abandonment and remembrance. In the end, Aya's own mental state stays split in two. Even though she has grown into a kind and caring woman, she still feels guilt and pain from everything that happened to her as a child. Her duality is in contrast to what's left of her father. Living under the watchful eye of the demon, he has both advanced his research as well as stayed clinging to the life he had before. This scene, this horrid, disgusting, depraved scene, is why I had to put a giant content warning at the beginning. The scene implies that Alfred not only created a clone of his daughter to gawk at, but that he is also planning on bringing another child into hell using this mature Aya as its mother. I don't even need to explain why this is horrific, do I? In Miso, we see what has become of the doctor and his years of serving this demon. It's not even subtle, as Miss Library, a young girl with black hair and blue eyes who enjoys reading, has a room that looks like Aya's, has Aya's diary stashed away in the library, and explicitly tells the protagonist that only her father is allowed to call her Aya. This is all so fucked up. Not to mention, a similar thing seems to be implied in the beauty preserved ending. Alfred, having turned Aya into a doll, dresses her up in pretty clothes and kisses her goodnight. She is seated on a large throne, seemingly there just for her, and does nothing. She is dead, and her father is being affectionate to her as if she were alive, maybe even more. This scene also has extremely grim implications for the exact reasons that Alfred is obsessed with Aya. What's most tragic to me is that Aya doesn't seem to truly grasp the depths of depravity her father reached, as well as not fully grasping how her mother's treatment of her was also dehumanizing. In Blood Mode, we see adult Aya still grappling with her trauma, trying to make sense of the things she feels for her family when the happiest memories she has were with the exact people who hurt her unspeakably. Aya is also pictured here in place of Monica's aunt, the so-called disgrace of the Drevis family. Aya feels deeply alienated from her bloodline, but also eternally bound to them. She failed to continue her father's research or her mother's legacy. We see Aya embracing her father, mentally trying to come to terms with all he's done, trying to understand someone she used to look up to and love. She thinks her father is like her. She thinks her whole family is cursed, not being able to see the deeper truth of her abuse. Some people are depraved beyond saving, beyond understanding, and her father was one of them. Aya sees the good in everyone, even in someone like him, but sadly not in herself. Aya is clearly burdened by her childhood trauma even throughout adulthood, to the point where she's unsure of Maria's love and loyalty to her. Something Aya was able to do as a child, stand up for herself and claim her life as her own, she can't do it in adulthood as said childhood haunts her. What sense entered the revisiting of her trauma is explained as her eating a poisoned apple, probably to draw attention to the fact that Aya seems to resemble Snow White somewhat, but I think the true reason Aya was violently thrust back into her childhood is simply because trauma like that doesn't go away on its own. As she explores the deepest depths of her psyche, Aya is greeted by memories of playing with dead animals as a child, clearly associating that part of her life with everything else horrible that happened in the mansion. Notice how there are no happy memories in Blood Mode? Even Ina's dangling her legs, seemingly unscathed by the other dolls, is a direct callback to the moment right before Alfred killed her. All of this is the compounding guilt and sorrow that she can never move on from. Guilt that has resurfaced due to Jean's death. I've seen people try to claim that Aya has no compassion for her patients, nor her father's victims, and that she kills out of the same curiosity her father used to. This is not only deeply antithetical to Aya's character, but also so easily disproven. Allow me to play the scene that puts this claim to shame. See this frame? This frame right here, right before it cuts to black. This is Jean's corpse, viewed through Aya's eyes as she explores the depths of her trauma. Notice how Jean is the one person Aya can't seem to talk into closure like she can the other people she's encountered before. Jean's dead body does not look beautiful to Aya, like it did to her father, and Aya did not view Jean as a means to an end, like her mother viewed most everyone around her. To me, it seems almost explicit that Jean and Aya were romantically involved somehow, or at the very least had feelings for each other. Notice how Maria compares Aya's complimenting of Jean to Alfred, while Jean herself is feeble like Monica was. Their relationship is a direct subversion of the precedent Monica and Alfred tried to set. Monica pursuing the Dr. Alfred, who seemed bewildered at her at best and disinterested at worst, eventually roping him into the bizarre and horrific world of her family's history. Contrast that to Jean, seeking out a doctor and finds Dr. Aya, both very eager and interested in her, but ultimately unable to help, resulting in Jean's death and Aya's spiraling into her traumatic past. When proving Aya's good intentions, disgrace of the Drevis family is as clear as it gets. Aya is not what her family wants her to be. She is not a murderous psychopath like her mother wanted her to be, and she is not a pure and untainted little girl doll that her father wanted her to be. She is not the successor of a lineage of cultists, and she is not a careless girl deaf to the suffering of others. Aya Drevis is kind and brash and bold. She is brave and curious and compassionate. She is loyal if a little dim-witted and reckless. She's clever and strong, but not perfect. She's psychologically scarred beyond healing. She puts others before herself, but still understands the importance of her own survival, until backed into the deep, dark pit in her shattered mind that values her just as little as her father did. Aya Drevis is a disgrace to the Drevis family legacy. She's a disappointment to her mother and an insatiable obsession to her father. And yet, in the end, she is smiled upon. Despite her own insecurity, she is cared for and loved. Not for what people want out of her, but for who she is as a person. Mad Father is an extremely disturbing game, but one I find myself invested in every time I play it. It's not as outwardly disgusting as something like the reveal at the end of Misao, but it is horrifying enough with its implications to be just as gut-wrenching. Speaking of RPG Maker horror games, I was thinking on maybe making videos like this on some of them. Sadly, not Misao specifically, because everything in that game seems pretty cut and dry, even down to the fact that Aki and Misao are 100% a canon couple and you can't change my mind. Joking aside, these games do hold a special place in my heart, and I'd love to do an in-depth dissection of something like Ib, Off, Witch's House, or hell, maybe even Yumaniki if I feel so bold. I know this isn't like my other videos, which are mostly jokey Deltarune theories and stuff, but this kind of stuff is also something I'm deeply passionate about doing. What can I say? I have a soft spot for edgy things. Other than that though, I am also a filthy homestuck, and the idea of doing a video series where I class pick characters from games like these has been on my mind for a while, especially because class picking genuinely is something I do gladly and go in depth with to the best of my abilities. But before that, I'd have to make a video explaining my understanding of aspects which... would anyone even watch that? Like, what percentage of my audience are homestucks? And how many of them are deep enough in this burb sauce to know and care about class and aspect systems? All in all, this video was a surprising breath of fresh air to my typically Deltarune themed content. Hopefully I'll be able to do more stuff like this, but like with less disturbing subject matter. If you've made it this far into the deep dive, thank you for watching, it truly means a lot. And hey, if there's something you want me to discuss, leave a comment. I probably won't do everything that's suggested, but I do try to keep up with my comments and respond to them, so you're at least guaranteed to hear my opinion. What goes at the end of a video? I don't use social media, but you can follow my art Tumblr, I guess. I have a Deltarune fan comic named Dreadnought. If you want to check it out, it would be appreciated. Go play Mad Father if you haven't already. Like, it got a re-release, as I said, and it's super worth the money, I promise. Like, originally I was kind of upset at the idea of repackaging classic RPG Maker horror games and selling them, but having played through a few, I think it was a good call in retrospect. Yumaniki stayed both the same and also free, which is unspeakably cool, but then there's also the disaster 3D remake of it, so you win some, you lose some. Hey, did you guys know that there's an official Yumaniki manga? It was made by Machigirita, I think, but honestly, I didn't enjoy it. It's the reason I'm sort of hesitant to read the Witch's House manga. Like, it has a lot of important lore stuff in it, but I also don't want to risk the game with characters being Oh my god, I'm still recording.